So I want to talk about how to raise your standards. So how to raise your standards for your income, your success, your relationships, your health. One of my earlier business mentors really drilled it into me that your goals don't even matter. So what you say you want doesn't matter. What you aim for doesn't matter. You will always get your baseline standards. You will always sink down to your standards because the pain of growth is just too great compared to the comfort of I don't have to if I don't want to. And so how do you actually get past that? Well, there's a few things, and this is having worked with as many people to start their businesses and get them to 100,000 a year, $1 million a year. Even we got one person at $10 million a year. Every single one, there's obviously the strategical component to the business, the actual marketing and sales and the client attraction, client delivery, all these elements. The component, time and time again, that creates the most lasting results is the mental component. And one of there's really a few categories to the mental component. One of them is standards. The other categories are self-image, who you believe you are and what you believe that person deserves. Okay? The other category is confirmation bias, a negative bias or a positive bias, and there's a few other components. But the first component is standards. So I'll get right into how do you raise your standards. The very first thing is you must remove safety nets. You have to. You have to remove safety nets. Safety nets should be for deep times of crisis, if not non-existent. It's quite hard, and so one of the members who joined our Scaling Blueprint program, this is our mastermind to get people to $1 million a year. And it's so funny, when I mention our products at all, our viewership goes so down. But guys, you gotta understand, most of my time is spent actually consulting with real business owners. I'm not an influencer. I actually help real people build real businesses, okay? So I'm gonna reference my products because that's what I do with my time, alright? This is where my time should be spent, is getting results for people who've paid us. So, but we had this one person join, he had about $400,000 in real estate, and then he had this other business that he joined, he came in doing about $30,000 a month. My first piece of advice was sell your real estate, dude. And at first he was taken aback, because this is a man with a wife and kids and everything. And I was like, and it's intense. It was very intense of me. But that's just the level of intensity that required. And I said, well, because here's why. Because if you have that backup plan, the pain of the perceived risk, there's actually no true risk in business. There's no true risk. Risk comes from uncalculated decisions. That's where risk is in business. There's no risk in business if you know your numbers and you're calculated. And I am my greatest case study here. I've lost so much money making uncalculated decisions. So a lot of people, they've had this amazing trip up and it's only been up. I've had steep lows and downs. And so you have to understand, I speak from experience here, that risk comes from not calculating decisions and not having the full story of the full data in front of you. And maybe as well as not being able to manage your relationships well within the business. So I told him to sell his real estate, and it wasn't a year later that he was doing $100,000 to $150,000 a month. And when he looks back, one of the key things was that he sold his properties and used that money, moved the money into the company account, didn't spend it on anything in the company account, but purely it was like, okay, this money is here for marketing tests, for bringing on team, for helping us scale when we need. So he's got this bucket now, because it was safety net just in case. And then it became bucket for us to grow the business with. So safety nets and standards don't exist. They just don't. In my life, I grew up in a pretty well-off household. So my father was pretty successful. And, my mother and my dad were career-driven people. My mom ended up being kind of a mother for the home more than anything once she just realized she resented her career. Which I should have a video coming up soon with my wife where we just talk a lot about that. But anyway, that's a whole other topic. And so I had to, at a really early age, deny my father's debt. And I have to continue to. because it's cushy and it's cozy, and and it'd be really easy to just kind of sink back into. And so I actually when I was just getting started in entrepreneurship, I envied people with a come up story who came from like nothing. I envied them because they didn't have to fight the fight of, I don't have to do this if I don't want to. It was a must. Tony Robbins talks about turning your shoulds into musts. So I had to dig very, 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 very deep to build what I've built today. I had to dig much deeper than I think a lot of people had to. And I'm not complaining. It's kind of like a woe is me thing. I'm not here to say that I had it worse off or anything. I'm just here to say that was my personal journey. Is that I had to dig past that. I don't have to if I don't want to. So safety nets and standards. Your safety net will always win. You have to get rid of the safety net. The second thing when it comes to standards is who you are around. Who do you surround yourself with? And more than who do you surround yourself with, who do you allow to speak into your heart of hearts? So who do you listen to? Because I'm experiencing right now a lot of growing pains in the business. I'm just being very candid. Being very, very candid. A lot of growing pains. Things are harder than they've been in a long time. I feel more like a beginner than I've felt in a very long time. But I have the comfort of it. At any point, if I really wanted to, I could go back to $100,000, $200,000 a month as a one, maybe three-man show and crush it. But I don't want that. I want to build something bigger, and I've always wanted to when I'm really honest with myself. So I've got less money in the bank than I've had in a minute, but it's because we're building wider. And, that's just how it is. And so when I look at that, what's easy for me to do? And this is kind of me giving myself my own therapy. Well, it's easy to go back to what's comfortable. Really, really, really easy to go back to what's comfortable. But what must happen is I must surround myself with people who are doing the uncomfortable things that I'm trying to do, and doing them well, too. You have to, and it's just some advice, don't just get around people who have been succeeding for the past couple months, or maybe a year, maybe even like a year and a half or 2 years. Get around it, and sorry, you probably heard that on the mic. Get around people who have been at that level for a long, long, long time. 5 years plus. Because you are going to soak up their standards just by proximity. So if you have to pay to be in that room, pay to be in that room. If you have to invest in those relationships, invest in those relationships. Okay, so standards, to raise your standards, get rid of safety nets, and change the people you're around. The third thing is have honest conversations with yourself. How long has it been since you actually sat down and said, do I actually want this? Is this something I actually want? Because if you don't actually want it, guess what's going to happen? You're going to face that resistance, that little bit of resistance is going to come and be like, I never even actually really wanted this. Maybe I could try if I wanted to, but I don't really want it, and it's gone. It's game over at that point because, again, the force of I don't have to can't compete with it not being a must or a necessary deep-seated need for you to do this. Okay? So, have the honest conversation with yourself. Reflect. Journal. I personally, I go to a counselor, and I'm actually on the market for another counselor. I want somebody who can help me look at my childhood traumas and the things that I've been through, and look at me as a person and help me understand what it is that maybe is blocking me from sort of that next level of thinking in my own psychology. And I've kind of gone from counselor to counselor. I'm actually kind of always on the market for somebody who is able to be that mirror for me. And my wife somewhat is, but she's not a registered psychologist, right? So it's a bit different. But she's helped me a lot in this way, helping me be honest. And what I realized, honestly, since being married, is I could give a rip about money. I don't want money. What I want is influence. And what I want is to be able to impact people's lives positively with that influence. And what I want is to build something bigger than myself. And something that, because it exists, the lives of hundreds, maybe thousands, maybe tens of thousands of people are truly better off. Not just like, oh, that was nice, but like, wow, I am so glad I stumbled into this thing. That's what I want. And there's going to be a lot of money on the other side of that. And with that money, I don't know. I'll invest. I don't know what I'll do. I have no idea. So that's the next thing is have the honest conversation with yourself. I don't think a lot of people know how to do that or have taken the time to do that. So they might know how, they don't take the time, or they don't know how, so when they try and do it, take the time, they can't. And a lot of the time people have built up so many walls between their conscious brain and their actual self due to traumas they've experienced, expectations placed on them, past challenges that they haven't relaxed from. There's a lot there. And so people often don't have the real conversation with themselves of what they actually truly want. And I think also this industry especially is very envy driven. I think a lot of people get into business, especially the internet business space, because they're like comparing themselves to somebody. I want to be more like them, especially the men. I've found, especially the men. Not so much the women. They've actually got this figured out, I think. But the men especially, they are very envy driven. And I'm totally speaking for myself here. And that's not a good place to start. It's maybe a good place to, it's a good place to start maybe, but it's not a good place to stay. It's a hot, burning fuse, but it's short, and you don't make good decisions there. So, first, get rid of safety nets. Second, surround yourself with people with the standards that you want. Okay? Third is have the real conversation with yourself. What do I actually want? What do I actually want? Probably last on this list, fourth, would be, I'm split between a few things. I'll make 5. Fourth would be act as if. If my standards were as such, how would I behave in this scenario? Act that way. It's quite simple. If my standards, for me, were to be a world-renowned business leader and influence and impact the lives of tens of thousands, while having a beautiful marriage, what would I act like? Who would that person be? Because it's certainly not who I once was. One of our top performing sales reps in my company asks me, what's the difference between pride and proud? Being proud is being proud of where you've come from and who you are now. Pride is thinking you're better than other people. So I think you need to be proud of yourself. I think you need to have that internal conflict and get better. And one of the easiest ways to do that is to act as if. Right? If I were the top performing sales rep in my company, how would I act? If I were setting the standard for the rest of my team, how would I act? If I were the leader of a large business, how would I act? If I were, how would I act? What would that person do? I'm just going to do that. And you'll find in this way that your identity is fluid because you can create that person. So that brings me to the 5th point, which is, who do you think you are? Who do you think you are? Because who you think you are becomes who you are with time. Carl Jung says it like, it doesn't matter what's true, it only matters what we believe is true, because with time it will become true. And this is true about the self, it's true about money, it's true about the world. Whatever you believe is true, you will see that truth unveil itself before you. So it's important to discuss with yourself and think, who am I? 2 good books on this. Psycho-Cybernetics by Dr. Maxwell Maltz. If you've been following me on the internet for more than 2 weeks and you haven't picked up this book and bought it, don't know what you're doing. That is probably the most life-changing book I've ever read. Second book, it's probably like Psycho-Cybernetics, kind of on steroids, with a hint of New Age spirituality, which I'm a little bit careful with because I'm a devout Christian. And so finding the ways in which New Age spirituality can intertwine with my Christ-based worldview and faith can be somewhat challenging, but there's a lot of ways that they intertwine, actually. But there's a few things, like self-worship, that I'm very, 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 very careful with. I'm not a humanist, and I'm not a hedonist. But the book Reality Transurfing by Vadim Zeland, Russian quantum physicist, talks a lot about what you put out is what you get back, that sort of thing. And your deep-seated beliefs about the world talks a lot about pendulums and how a lot of the time we aren't actually our true selves because we're hooked into somebody else's influence over us, or the world's influence, or a political conversation, or even a religious conversation, or financial conversation, or something that's pulling on us and preventing us from acting in our true self. And so, good book. And so, those are 5 ways to raise your standards. If you're not satisfied with your results in your life, do one of those 5 things and report back. Thanks for watching.